Hello, this is Eddie G's Music World. This is my fourth edition of my show, and it is April 24th, 2018, and we are continuing where I left off, which was my rock concert review show. We've gone through quite a bit. This is the fourth edition, so obviously I've seen quite a bit of concerts, so it takes a while to get through all the incredible shows I've seen, and I'm remembering little tidbits of how the shows were, and highlights of the show, lowlights of the show, whatever I can remember. I don't have any script. I didn't write anything down to prepare. Just going through my old shows that I've seen and commenting on them. I'm looking at a concert I saw in the early 1990s, and it was Richard Marx. He had a very good 5 years of production, of being productive, of having a lot of hits in the late 80s, early 90s. So I knew a lot of his songs, and I was curious to see what he sounded like. I had heard that he's very anti-disco, and sure enough, he did have a bit of a 5-minute rant saying how he hates dance and disco music and everything else. And he plays piano, and he sings, and I thoroughly enjoyed the show. And opening for Richard Marx was World on Edge, kind of a fluffy pop band from Canada. Never really became huge. They had 2 or 3 minor songs, and they never really became huge. I actually saw them twice because they opened up for other I forget which one, maybe Roxette, a few years earlier. So, and also Sass Jordan, who I've seen 3 times, opened up for the Richard Marx concert that I saw. So Richard Marx definitely was good. It was at a place in Verdun, the Verdun Auditorium, who a lot of bands have been there, but it's not an easy to find rock concert. It's not downtown. It's not West Island. It's in Verdun. But it was worth seeing. He has a great voice. He went on to write some, and I think maybe produce songs for Celine Dion and others. So he's had an amazing career. But his production of songs that were popular lasted about 5-6 years. But those are amazing 5-6 years for him. He definitely flourished in the early 90s. I see another concert. I think it was the second concert I've ever seen in my life. September 3rd, 1976. I was 16 years old. It was my second show. And it was the Electric Light Orchestra. And they were at the Place des Nations, which is an outdoor venue in St. Helens Island. They had a full band with them, like orchestra. And Jeff Lynne was in fine form. I was really happy with the concert. It was, I'm never been a big fan of outdoor shows, but you know, they didn't give me an option. I had to go to the outdoor show. I would have missed it, so I went. And they didn't have as many hits in 1976 as they would have had like 4 or 5 years later, when they turned the corner and became a much more commercial band. But they had a lot of their classic hits from the Showdown and other orchestrated songs that they were very well known for. And it was the opening band for that was Widowmaker. I don't know how I remember that. It's 42 years ago, but they never really became really well known in North America. But I guess if they got on the bill with ELO, they must have had a following in England or something. And I think they were okay, but nothing stood out in my memory about the opening band. But I was glad I did get to see ELO. On another note, I think it was through 3 or 2 years later, they were supposed to come to the Forum of Montreal. They had a couple of, they had another big album after I saw them, and they were really, really big. They became more popular. But they were supposed to bring in this massive spaceship setup on the stage where they had an expensive setup situation. And for whatever reason, it became too expensive to pull off the show, or other shows too, and they canceled. So here I was, a jealous little boy, 17-year-old, in my room, mad that nobody wanted to go to Electric Light Orchestra with me. And I just sat there, or whatever reason, and I was sulking that I didn't go. And then I hear on the radio that it's canceled, so I was happy that I didn't end up buying tickets and having to give them back. I just didn't. There was no show. A lot of other people were very upset because they were a bigger band at the time and they had more fans, and it was a big deal on the Montreal radio station show 'em that it was canceled. And I remember that specifically. I'm looking down the list, and it's a tribute band. I saw a few of those tribute bands over the years, and this one was the Back Doors. This is at the Spectrum of Montreal, which has since closed down, but at the time it was a very popular concert place. Saw a lot of shows there, and they were really good. They sounded like the Doors. It's a vivid memory of mine. But you know, these tribute bands don't really they don't get airplay on the radio. You don't think of them after the concert. I doubt if they are still around. I mean, it's maybe 40 close to 40 years ago or 38 years ago. The cost was $6.50. So money well spent, because they did do a very good job. I look and I see another Forum show. This was the old Forum before they moved to Bell Center, which was more centrally downtown. And this is the Forum where the Canadians played too. And it was Roxette, and they were really peaking then. They had a good 6-7 hits at the time, and I liked them. They were a very commercial band, of course, very poppy. And they had songs like Must Have Been Love and The Look. And when you have a commercial band, it's easy to enjoy the concert because you hear the songs all the time and you want to see how they reproduce live. And I remember they did a very good job. Years later, they came back, I think, and now I heard a few years ago that the singer, whose name escapes me, got cancer of some kind. So I don't think I'm not sure. I think she might have gotten a little better, but anyway, it's many years ago. And if they came back to Montreal, I don't see them at any concert, so I probably wouldn't go back, but I did like the show when it came out. I see another show's on my list right now. Marilyn Manson. Okay, that was July 2001. About a $44 ticket. And it was at the Metropolis, who I think changed their name to something M Club or something else now, but they're still around, Metropolis Club. And Marilyn Manson, I've always liked the hard rock style of her concert. Not her, it's a guy, but I see the name Marilyn, I'm thinking of her. And they put on a great show. It was a very, very full house in Metropolis, a very hot night, as I remember. And I love that show. And after the show, French television was walking around with a microphone, and they interviewed me briefly and asked me what I thought of the concert, and I gave a review since I had just left, and it ended up on television, and one or two people saw it on TV. Some French people I knew saw me on television, so that was fun. I made it on TV. And also walking around the concert was the opening act, Lennon. It's a girl that called herself Lennon. It was her actual given name. She was pretty good. And then I talked to her later because I saw her and she signed a CD for me of hers. And then later on, probably about 7 or 8 years later, Yoko Ono sued her to stop her from using the name Lennon, since she felt, since she's John Lennon had some rights to keep his name exclusive for his music and his talents. And I believe it was dropped because Lennon, the singer that I saw, the woman, was never a major act anyway. I don't know what, financially, I don't think there was much there to get for Yoko because she's already worth hundreds of millions. I guess she just probably tried to stop her from using her name. And she's on YouTube, this Lennon. I liked her music, but she doesn't get any airplay, and she's pretty much not a major act, which doesn't take anything away from her talent. She's very talented, but I'm pretty sure most people forgot about Lennon, the singer. But I did manage to meet her, so that was a fun moment. I see another one of these concerts where my friend Oren used to drag me to these kind of obscure acts, and this is one that's so obscure that I don't remember the concert at all. It was called Fluffy at the Cabaret, which I don't know if it's still around. It was 1997, so 21 years ago. And honestly, there's not a lot I can say about a concert I forgot. I should look up Fluffy to see if they're still around or what happened to them. because I'm pretty curious about these kind of obscure acts, and maybe there's something when I look it up, there might be something interesting in their music that'll jar my memory. So I'll make that a project of mine. Next I see is another alternative band act. So I knew only one song. It was by an act called Peter Murphy, also at the Spectrum. He had a song at the time called Cuts You Up, and maybe one or two other ones too. He was in another band. I think it might have been the Buzzcocks, or I don't remember. And he was kind of had a little staying power in the alternative world, where he got some momentum built up, but he never became a major act. But I liked the concert. It was really well done. He was this scrawny guy. He must have weighed 130 pounds, and he was skin and bones, but he sang very well. So the concert, I would say, was very fulfilling, enjoyable concert from what I can remember. Okay, next concert at a club. It was Club Soda, now it's called, and then it was called Cabaret. The Republica, who they had a big album at the time, and it was Ready to Go was their song. And this was an amazing show. I remember really enjoying it because it was a small club and it was full, and they had really upbeat music, and everybody was in a good mood, and you know, it was full of life, the show. And later on, after this concert, Ready to Go, of course, was a massive hit, and a couple other ones, Drop Dead Gorgeous. But Ready to Go became an anthem for sports teams. Like within, I don't know if they're still playing the song, but they were for many years after the song came out. So when a hockey game or a football game or a baseball game would start, they would play the song Ready to Go, because it was the beginning of the sporting event. So hopefully this band got money out of using their song at the beginnings of baseball and football and hockey and basketball games, since it was used a lot. I'm guessing they did very well with that. So that was one of my great shows that I enjoyed. And let me see how much I paid, see if I got my money's worth. Wow, $10 and $1.15 in taxes, $11.15. If I went into McDonald's now, and if I ate everything I really wanted to eat in McDonald's for a lunch, I would pass $11.15. So it shows that it was worth the money, and I don't know what's going on with that band, whether or not they're around, but I'm glad I did see them back then. Excuse me. Duran Duran, 1993 July. Look at the prices, $27.50 and $3.25 taxes. You can't go wrong with a band that had 20-something hits or close to 20 hits. You know they're just going to crack them out. They can do it for the rest of their eternity for the band. I mean, as long as they want to tour, they'll always have people coming. And they reproduce well. They're a very top 40 act. Not heavy metal, not, dance music, but mostly just pop. But they're great at it. They know how to do it well. They sing well. The musicians were in great form that night. And, they've come back since. I almost went to see them. There was a time where they went to a much smaller venue called the Metropolis, which hold like 1,200 or 1,300 people. And because it was smaller, I almost went back. But you know what? Later in life, you get a little lazy. They're at night at 8, 9 o'clock. And, I live far now from all these concerts. They're all very, very far from my house. So for me to go, and a lot of times nobody wants to go with me to these shows, I just don't bother to go to that many shows. I go to maybe 3, 4, 5 a year. It used to be like 8 or 9. But time marches on. You can't run out at 8, 9 o'clock every month for concerts. At least I don't do it anymore. L7, this is an early concert in the 90s, August 1992, in a place called the Rialto Theater. They had a song called Pretend That They're Dead and a couple of other ones. It's an all-woman band. Very enjoyable show. Not sure if they're really that big anymore. I don't listen to the radio stations that play that kind of music that much. So they probably maybe have 1 or 2 songs that still get played on an alternative channel here and there. They never became this massive band like a Bangles or Go-Go's or anything like that. But their music was harder than the Bangles and Go-Go's. So maybe they were not middle of the road, which not hurt them, but it made them less popular. Because when you don't appeal to housewives and soccer moms and you play heavy punk music, you're not going to get a good array of people listening to your music, because you're more of a bit on the alternative side. And I see another act, which I don't have much to say, except that she was very mellow. It was December 1992, Club Soda, which used to be on Park. Her name was May Moore. It was okay show. It wasn't a show that's full of excitement. It was just somebody kind of strumming a guitar and maybe a little bit of piano to go with it and singing. And they didn't have a song that was that well known that I can remember. Now, if I go and research it and I look up May Moore, maybe there'll be one song that I remember from way back then, but pretty much a forgotten act that I have no clue what they're up to currently. I think I remember them being just a pleasant show, kind of jazzy, laid back. So it was an okay night, but it wasn't a night that, let's just say, if I didn't go to the concert, I wouldn't have missed an unbelievably exciting show. This is a show which was chock full of rock stars. It was the Ringo Starr All-Star Band, which I saw in Barrie, Ontario, July of 2001, because I was in a meeting with a company I worked for in Ontario, and one of the co-workers asked if I wanted to go, and got to see Ringo Starr. He played a lot of his Beatles songs that he sang on, like 4 or 5 of them. And that was mixed in with Roger Hodgson, who, it was like a band that played, and all the musicians played for the singers of the songs that they had. So in other words, when Ringo sang his songs, the other instruments were playing along with Ringo. Then there was Ian Hunter, who was there playing guitar. So when he played Ian Hunter songs or Mott the Hoople songs, because he was in Mott the Hoople, the other instruments were playing along with him. So this is the breakdown of the acts at the Ringo Starr All-Star Band. It was Ringo Starr, Roger Hodgson, Greg Lake, Ian Hunter, Sheila E. I don't know if I mentioned Howard Jones or not, but Howard Jones was there. So Howard Jones played his songs, kind of upbeat pop songs, and all the other instruments were playing along with him, and so forth. So I liked it. I mean, great to hear some Ringo hits that he had, and he did get by with a little help from my friends. And I remember somebody had a sign about the Beatles, and Ringo said, "Enough with the Beatles. Stop bothering. Just stop asking and trying to remember trying to bring back an old band and get over it," type of thing. So I liked it. It was fun. I almost saw them again another time, but I never went to see them again. But it was an enjoyable show. There's no question. It's always fun to go to a show in another city. You see how the fans react to the music differently, because it's a different town and not the same clientele. I see the next one. Let's see. Our Lady Peace. I saw this band that night. I remember it was Club Soda on St. Lawrence Street. Not a very big venue, but the band at the time was really, really big, and it was advertised. It was a winter show. Let me see if it's the dates on here. It must be. I remember it was around December. Yeah, 13th of December 2000. It was advertised as first come, first served, meaning they knew they were more popular than the venue. So at the time they were huge. So they basically could see 700 or 800, and if you showed up and you were the first 700, 800, you got in, and if you were the next whatever after that, they shut. It was a very inexpensive concert. I think it's $16. And I liked their music at the time, and I thought they were a progressive band. They had some success in the U.S. They are Canadian. The singer is married to Chantal Kreviazuk, and Rain Maida, his name is. So I did see him that night, and he was fun. He was like swinging from the rafters a bit, and his voice was very powerful. So it was great to see an act play in a smaller venue than they're used to. And then, interesting enough, I saw him again open up for Guns N' Roses. I saw Our Lady Peace a second time, but I really didn't see them because it was a massive walk from the Metro to the Guns N' Roses show. And by the time we got there, they were finishing their shift. So I maybe heard 1.5 songs of them the second time around, but I did see them the second time a little bit. Alanis Morissette is the next one at Théâtre Saint-Denis. Hard to believe, August 2004. This is a show $51, with at the time was quite a bit of money, but it was a great show. She's plays guitar, and I think maybe she plays piano. I don't remember that part, but she had a really good voice. I remember buying cheap seats, but then we moved down for the last 2 songs, and boy, it's a big difference when you're up in the lousy seats for 75% of a concert, and then you move down to the front for the last 25%. You get the better sound quality as soon as you move up in the venue. So that was really good. She was peaking around that time. Alanis has not recaptured the momentum she had from Jagged Little Pill, which was about early 90s, and her disco era, which was the late 80s or 1990, where she had Matt LeBlanc in a couple of her videos. And so, I mean, she was turning into an oldies act, which is typical of most acts. They don't sustain popularity for 25 years. And she played all her hits and a couple other ones, and I liked it. I mean, I've never seen her again, but it doesn't mean it wasn't because I didn't enjoy her concert. It was a very well done show. Next I see is Joan Jett, and that was early 90s. Let me check if the date there, 1992. So wow, 26 years ago, 18th of April. That must have been a cheap concert, $9.50. And I was front row with that. I remember it was one of these concerts where you pay general admission at the Brick. And we went right to the front, and one of the songs she was playing, I actually took my hand and rubbed her leg a bit. It was a bold move on my part. I'm very lucky her security wasn't watching that closely, or they might have smacked me in the head a bit from going to those extremes to getting a little too close to the singer. But I mean, I was careful not to get too seductive with her. I didn't start going up her leg too high, and she's a lesbian, so she wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. And but I liked that concert. It was a small club, and not that small, but not huge. And interesting enough, she's coming back to town in August 2018 with Styx at Laval, at the Centre La Belle in Laval. But I'm not going to go because I've seen her once, and I've seen Styx like 3-4 times already. So I can't keep running out every time somebody comes back to town. But nothing against her. She's great. I mean, if anybody hears this podcast and wants to go see her, I would say you'll probably enjoy it. Coincidentally enough, I have another lesbian act next. Melissa Etheridge. Really great show. Great guitarist. This is 1992 as well. It was the next month, May of 1992, in Théâtre Saint-Denis. She's a very popular singer in Montreal and the United States. Although I checked her YouTube views, and she had some very big songs here that got 400,000 or 500,000 views in the US, which, not US, but worldwide, because YouTube is worldwide. So I was a little surprised. I thought she was a massive star that got millions of views. You know, you see some hip hop acts, they get 1 billion views. And I guess the younger people prefer to go on YouTube more than the older people like me from acts from the 80s and 90s, like Melissa Etheridge. But it was a high energy show. She had a full band with her. I knew about 6-7 songs, and I'm glad I went. She's been back a few times. Haven't gone back again, but not saying I will never go back. She was fun to watch. And she used to be buddies with Terry DeMontigny, a very popular show morning man. I should ask him if he still speaks to her on Twitter, because he does reply to me once in a while, because I know that they used to talk. But I've heard her on the radio, on satellite radio. She has a radio interview show where she interviews other rock stars. And I've heard her a little bit on the radio from doing those type of shows. Next page. Wow, I got a lot of concerts. This might last 6 episodes. I've done 25 minutes so far. Hey, I should say what you're listening to. Eddie G's Music World, where we talk about all things music. I started off the theme of rock concert reviews of shows that I've actually seen. And I've gone through probably 60-70% of them, and I might as well get to the end. Could take me 6-7 episodes, but it's all right. I don't have anything stopping me from getting through to the end. It'll make me look into other topics too. So I see a concert next. It's one of those shows that I have a story to tell to go along with it. Natalie Merchant. She was the singer from 10,000 Maniacs. Now, this is 1999, October, and I was dating someone at the time, and they got spooked about things pretty easily, that particular girl. So she freaked out and got stressed out that people were looking at her and talking to her and talking about her. So she made my enjoyment of the concert zero. And I couldn't listen, I couldn't enjoy it, I couldn't relax. She was stressed out the whole show and hiding in the back of the concert hall, and weird stuff was going on, and she ruined the show. I guess it's not her fault. She just got very stressed out about things, and that made it hard for me to enjoy, and it was a forgettable show, but you can't fault the act because I didn't give the act a chance. I couldn't sit still and listen to the music. Another concert where I met actually one of the people in the band, Chumbawamba. They had a couple of songs that were popular. The most popular is Tub Thumping. Yeah, that's what it's called. And that was really huge at the time. They were $16 ticket, and that was, I'm blocking my ticket stuff, how much I paid. I think it was about $18. Yeah, I can see it now. And it was a fun show. It was general admission. Everybody was dancing because they were that kind of a band, you know, where everybody's upbeat and jumping around. And this was the 1997, almost 1998. So I don't remember if there was an opening act or not, but even if there was, I forgot it for sure. And it was a concert slightly ruined by my gambling at the time. I had some huge bet going on, and it was playing. The football game was playing that night, so I kept running to the telephone to, I didn't have updates on my phone at the time. Like, this is 21 years ago, so I kept going to a telephone and calling up a telephone sports line that would give me the scores, and ended up losing a few $100s that night. So I didn't enjoy the concert as much as I would have because of that. So those are two back-to-back concerts which both have a story to tell. Don't they all, really? Coming up to Chantal Kreviazuk, she had a couple of songs out, so I went to see her. This is a cheap show, $29, it looks like it was. 2000, the year 2000, and it was Club Soda. It was a boring show. It was kind of laid back, piano, bass type of concert. And she was married to Rain Maida, who I saw a few months earlier. She still is married to him. He's the lead singer of Our Lady Peace. And she's had a couple of songs, and she got into a big legal battle with Avril Lavigne a few years ago, where she wrote most of one of her two of her songs, and Avril added a couple of words, and she took co-writing credit, and Kreviazuk called her out on it and kind of criticized her and saying she didn't deserve the co-write, which meant millions for her, of course, because at the time Avril Lavigne was a big star. And they settled it off. I think they both pretty much said they were sorry, and that kind of incident was left alone. It didn't go that far. But she's not never broke in the U.S. pretty much, but she wrote a few hits, so helped her out in life. And she's married to a guy who has a good career, so she's done very well for herself. And I'm almost sure I've heard one of her songs in a commercial on TV too. A concert I wish I kind of didn't really enjoy that much. It's the Heads. It was like Tina Weymouth and Chris Frowns from the Talking Heads with, I forget her first name, Napolitano from the group Concrete Blonde as the lead singer, replacing David Byrne. And it was a small club, Petit Cafe Campus. It wasn't that big, and I don't know, it's pretty hard to take David Byrne vocals. Not that he had a great voice, but, he had a distinctive voice and style, and take a woman who's known for Concrete Blonde songs like Joey and Caroline, and stick her in the spot to do the songs of David Byrne's group Talking Heads. So it was a weird combination. I remember seeing Napolitano, the singer, being very pissed off and giving dirty looks to the other people in the band. And she looked like she didn't enjoy it either, and she was the singer. The only highlight of it was they did that song Bohannon. I forget Tina Weymouth and Chris Frost were in a band, and they did the song Genius of Love. The Tom Tom Club, that was the band, and they were massive for that one song, the Genius of Love, which was covered by Mariah Carey. And so they made a fortune because they wrote that. And then Mariah Carey covered it and went to #1 too. So they made a fortune, I'm sure. And they played Genius of Love. And the fans that knew that, it was from the Tom Tom Club were appreciating the fact that, they threw in their own side project music in the middle of the Talking Heads, the Heads show. And I'm sure they called themselves the Heads because David Byrne probably owned the name Talking Heads and refused to let them call themselves that since he wasn't part of it. So, and David Byrne's come back a few times to Montreal. He does tribal music type of thing and African music and Brazilian or whatever he does. I mean, I don't know it that well. I'm not putting it down. He's a talented guy, and he just wasn't part of the show that I saw. Next concert on the list, the Guess Who. This was, I think, all 4 original members. This is I think it was the Bell Center. Price on this one. This was August 2001. So imagine September 11th was about 12 days later, which was the Twin Towers going down 12 days right after this concert. Opening for him was another great act that I'll review too, because it was a co-headlining type of thing to me. So the Guess Who were great. They had all 4, and they had, of course, all their great songs. I don't think Burton Cummings did any of his solo material, but I remember that Randy Bachman did about 2 or 3 BTO songs, which was really great to see because I like BTO, and that's as close as you could have gotten to BTO, since it was just him that night. The other members of BTO were not there, and then of course they played all their BTO songs. They played all the Guess Who hits that people know, and that was really well done. Later on, they dropped the Guess Who name because I know the fact that one of the members of the Guess Who, I think it was the bass player or the drummer, lesser known guys, I forget which one, Gary Hale or somebody else, it doesn't really matter. He bought the name The Guess Who. So every time the Guess Who toured, even if he wasn't there, because this other player owned the name The Guess Who, they had to pay him. So whether he showed up or not, they had to write checks to the guy every year because he owned the name. He was smart. Even though the band had broken up, he went to court and he said how much to buy the name, and it was like 30, 40 grand or whatever it was, which sounds like a lot of money, but maybe over the next 20 years, I think he probably made a few $100 grand doing that. So it was a smart move. So now, if there's a Guess Who tour, they call themselves Cummings, Bachman Cummings. So they don't have to kick into that guy any money because they're not using the Guess Who name. And I know that they've toured under Bachman Cummings, and Randy Bachman has come to town here and there, and so has Burton Cummings on his own. So they're always floating around. But I like that show. And the opening act for the Guess Who was kind of a cold headliner because this guy had a huge career too. It was Joe Cocker, and I was really impressed by him. He banged out all of his great songs. His voice was in great form, and I always liked his singing. I didn't know how he would reproduce his vocals from the record, but he was very impressive. And he's no longer with us. I'm trying to remember the year he died. I'm going to guess 2012 or 13. And he was a great talent, a bit offbeat, but still an enjoyable concert. Here comes a band that I've seen twice, but in 2 separate forms, because the first time I saw it was called Heaven and Hell. That's because Black Sabbath at the time, there was some money rights situation similar to the Guess Who story where Ozzy co-owned the name Black Sabbath. So if you toured with the name Black Sabbath, either Ozzy didn't let you do it because he co-owned the name and he wasn't in the band anymore, or Ozzy had to get a big cut of the money. One of those two was a motivation for them calling themselves Heaven and Hell, which had the Dio version singing. So Dio was the singer. And interesting enough, it was a very late concert. They only played music from the era that Dio sang. They didn't play any of the Black Sabbath era of Ozzy. But it was a late concert. I think it was Megadeth that opened for them. But the problem was that night, I got home around 1 a.m. And the next morning, I got in early at work, and I had to do some calculations on a proposal and a sale that I made. And I made a couple of little errors, which cost the company a few $100. But the manager figured it out and helped me get it right. But then he says, well, I corrected it for you, so we're making enough money, but now I'm firing you because you screwed up the calculations. So I lost my job the next day, but mostly for me, I'm gonna have to tell you, I hated almost every sales job I ever had. So whenever I got fired, it was like a mixed bag. I mean, the money stopped, but at the same time, I stopped having to work at the companies I hated and all the coworkers I hated, and managers. I've done sales all my life, but this is the kind of profession I want. But it's the kind of profession, doing radio, that it's not impossible to get paid for it, but it's extremely difficult. So although I've tried over the years, haven't had success getting paid, and I'm still continuing in that tradition because I doubt if I'll get money for this, but if it happens, I'll be thrilled. I'll be really happy. But if not, I'll still do it as long as I can, and I'm happy to continue doing it. So the Heaven and Hell show, it was amazing. Dio is a great singer, was a great singer. He died of colon cancer about 7 years ago, after the concert, obviously, many years. And I liked his vocals. Dio is a guy that, if you go back to early 1960s, believe it or not, you can see him on YouTube singing songs in like a doo-wop type of band. And then he was in another type of rock band later on after that. And then later on, he got into Black Sabbath. And then he had his own band, so he's a real survivor. No longer with us, unfortunately, but he really was a great contributor to the music world, in my opinion. In the same theme as Ozzy Osbourne himself, this was the early 80s. I don't see the date on my ticket stub, but I'm pretty sure it was 82. And at the time, he was it was his second solo year after leaving Black Sabbath, and he had a few of those songs that, Crazy Train and a couple more out. And, he was already, I think he had just had the bat biting incident around that time. I remember having lousy seats, like 30-something rows back on the floor, and I still like the show, but it's never good to go on the floor and be past 6 rows, 7 rows maybe, because you lose the sound. You can't see. You're looking over people's shoulders. It's not comfortable. You have to stand. I remember standing on the chairs in order to get a better view, because everybody else is standing, so you're kind of stuck. But I like the concert. It's not a memorable show because of the fact that the seating was lousy. But I still, I'm glad I saw him, and I probably would. He's getting old. He's almost 70. I'm guessing he's going to pull off another solo tour because his wife/manager likes to squeeze as much money out of him as she can, and knowing her, she's going to toss him back on the road for another million or two. So maybe I'll go see him. Who knows? Next I see is this. This is a concert. Can't even see the name of the act on here. I'll have to skip it because it's some show that the name of the guy who tears the tickets, what they do is they tear it, and sometimes they tear the part with the name of the act on it. So I have a feeling it's REM. Let me see if 1985. That could have been REM, although it says St. Catherine Street, so it wasn't REM because they were in a Maurice Richard Arena further down, so it wasn't REM. But I don't know who it is just because the ticket stub is torn up too badly. I see Nazareth. I'm only going to review the second show that I saw of Nazareth because the first concert is on a list of concerts that I'm going to leave towards the last segment because their concerts on a list of their own, which means I don't have ticket stubs for them, or they were free, or I lost the stubs. But this is the one in 2000. So I met, I liked it a lot. It was McCaffrey, the singer, the original singer was still there. And it was a small club called Bourbon Street West on Sources Boulevard. And there's a meeting situation of him, but I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to save that for a show about meeting rock stars. But I did like the show, and they played all their great songs, and the sound was good, because when you're in an intimate club, you get to hear things better. You're not in a cavernous arena or stadium where the sound is bouncing all over the place, and unless you're in the first few rows, you really don't get a great sound quality. But this was a small place. It wasn't more than 200 people, I would say. And the sound was great. They even played their bagpipes for one of their songs, and the singer was unbelievably great with his gravelly voice. In the last 4 or 5 years, he's retired, ill health, and he's no longer in the band. And they had some 30-year-old something guy he's not a bad singer. I heard him, but you're lacking quite a bit from the concert when you're replacing a guy like the lead singer of Nazareth. It's a pretty tall task because he has a very distinctive voice, and this guy can't replace that quality, but he's doing a decent job, I guess. And they're still touring. I guess there's money on the table, but I wouldn't go see Nazareth again. I've seen them twice. Pearl Jam, never saw them before. First time seeing them, August 1998, so coming on 20 years. This is at the Bell Center. Imagine, $36. Now they would probably charge 100 and something bucks. I was blown away by them. They really, really reproduced their instruments well, live on stage. Vocally, Eddie Vedder was in fine form. I was pleased to have gone. They were peaking at the time, 1998. They were still a hot band from Seattle. The grunge movement hadn't petered out yet. It was still intact, and still people were into that type of thing. And they had about 8 or 9 hits at the time that I knew very well. So I really liked it. The sad part of the show is the opening band was Cheap Trick, who was used to playing really, they used to play the Bell Center and be the headliner, or they did an outdoor show where they were the headliner. They were a bigger band earlier, like in the early 90s, late 80s, 70s. But this show, I was sad for them because I saw the fan reaction. They opened up for Pearl Jam, and nobody cared. Everybody was in their early 20s around me. They looked like they couldn't care less. They were talking to their friends, and they would play one of their hit songs, and nobody clapped, nobody cheered, or maybe a few little cheers here and there. It was because the fan base of Pearl Jam is nothing like the fan base of Cheap Trick. It was a very bad pairing, meaning the fans of Pearl Jam didn't care at all about Cheap Trick. So I didn't even get into it because I felt I could see the band was not enjoying it. Like they were not putting their usual, it was not as loud as it usually was, and their effort was a little, I wouldn't say they didn't try, they were professionals, but the show was kind of sad because when people don't react to a song that was a huge song, it's you feel sad for the band because they're playing up there, and they put a lot of work into the concert and to the records they created, and the fans don't react very much. It means that they're not getting the feedback that they want. But it was forgettable for them, but that's life. I've seen them 5 times, and the other 4 times I enjoyed them more than that, that's for sure. On the page, the last concert on this page, the Black Crowes, another example of a kind of drab show. I don't know what it was. The Robinson brothers, maybe they weren't getting along. It was dull. It was kind of like, they were tuning their instruments in between songs, I remember. They were okay, but it was boring a bit. And I liked the Black Crowes, but then again, I went with my cheap friend that likes to save money, and of course he picked the top level of the Théâtre Saint-Denis, the worst, cheapest seats. This is 22 years ago. It was like $38, so it wasn't cheap, dirt cheap, but it was the cheapest ones that they sold in that concert. So it was a forgettable show. The memory of the show, the memory of the show was that it was not that great. So I never saw them again, and since that time, they probably, I think they broke up. I think Chris Robinson has his band, and the other Robinson, I forget his name, has his band, and they basically don't get along. Like a lot of rock brothers, the guys from Oasis don't get along, and other brother sets. I think Dire Straits, the Knopfler brothers don't get along either. Not hard to believe, a lot of brothers fight. So, but anyway, the Black Crowes, not a great show, but I do like the band, so it's not a reflection on the talent or quality of the band or their songs. This is going back the next page to another band that I think at the time they had one or two songs, popular songs, that were played on alternative radio. I can't remember the name of the song because I didn't prepare for this show. It was called the Lemonheads. I think there was a song in a Jim Carrey movie. This is my memory, but it's very, very vague. I liked the show, but it was a forgettable show in the fact that I can't even remember what their song was. It shows that they were not a massive band, but they had a couple of, at least one song that was fun, very light concert, and it was at the Cabaret, which became the Club Soda. So this is 1996. So maybe I'll look up the Lemonheads and remember their song and talk about it another time. Here's a band at the Club Soda, which was the Cabaret that became the Club Soda. This is probably the first year or two that they changed their name. October 2003. Peaches. I don't know if you know who Peaches is. She's like electronic type of music. Kind of swears a lot and kind of a rough girl. And she had a video of Iggy Pop playing in the background. I think she did a duet with Iggy Pop. She's a BC act that was always... since then, she's gotten a bit of notoriety. I've heard her name used, spoken, like people talk about electronic acts that are getting momentum in music, and they've mentioned her a couple of times. I liked it. It was like a beatbox type of thing. She had like a speaker set up and some kind of synthesizer, and she sang, and there was no other act on the stage with her. But she pulled it off. I liked it. It was a full house, and she's, like I said, I haven't checked up on her career in the last couple of years, but I know around that time and a few years later, she had some popularity in the music business. I'm looking down the list at Matthew Good Band. Interesting. I remember seeing this show 1997, December, at the then Club Soda, but now they're called Koala. And I liked them. They had 2-3 songs out at the time. Kind of alternative and somewhat rock, like a mix, not heavy rock, but medium, somewhat heavy, but not that heavy, and alternative too. So they were good. I liked his voice. He had a very, distinctive style. And interesting enough, he's been in the news a couple of times lately. The one time was that I saw that he had some other band do a song. I can't remember the band. I'm thinking it's, I don't remember. I should have researched it before. But some other band had a minor hit with a song, and it sounds exactly like Matthew Good Band. Matthew Good Band had the song early, so the newer band kind of took the beat and the sound from Matthew Good. But Matthew Good had discussed it and said he's not suing them just because he figures, well, a lot of songs sound like other songs. I'm not bothering to sue them. So he let it go. And whoever the act was that did the second version of the song didn't get a lawsuit against them. There couldn't have been a lot of money there anyway. I saw a band that it's a weird combination of the situation with this show was the singers. It was the Alan Parsons Project. So the singers for the Alan Parsons Project changed quite a bit. So if you go back to the 70s, songs like Dr. Tar, Professor Feather, or Breakdown, that was sung by Alan Clark, and there were other songs sung by other people. John Miles, I think he did one of the songs. So when you see Alan Parsons, he's not going to go running around gathering up all the lead singers on all the songs that he had. There were 3, 4, 5 singers. There was one main guy. He wasn't there. So they had a couple of guys that kind of they're good singers, but they were just imitators of all of the songs, all of the vocals, of all the hits. So these guys did their best, and through no fault of their own, They were stuck with a very difficult job of having to sing on songs that they didn't sing on the record. And they didn't sound a lot like the guys that sang them, so it was a bit of a hard job for them. But it was good to see Alan Parsons there. I mean, the man engineered Dark Side of the Moon and I think one of the Beatles albums. And after the concert, I remember shaking his hand, which is an honor. He was a big star. So that was fun. So the show was, musically, it was great, but vocally, I'd have to say it lacked, but not much you could do. It would have cost them a fortune to gather 5 singers up and take them on the road. They probably didn't want to go anyway. And I see another guy on my list. This will be the last page because I'm keeping the shows around an hour. So this act was very big star at the time, absolutely huge. From Montreal is the Corey Hart. He was peaking. He had about 6 hits in the U.S. He had a full house at the Montreal Forum. And I was very impressed with him singing live. You know what? It's 30-something years ago. I'm trying to remember if he played an instrument. That's a tough one. That's like very hard to be sure. In 1985, that was quite a long time ago. So I won't say he played an instrument or he didn't, because I don't know. But he sang amazingly, in true form, and everybody ate it up. He was a pop idol at the time, and later on, I'd say about 12 years later, when his career was pretty much petering out and he was no longer selling records anymore, he was on a national talk show, and I got through and I got on the air, and I talked to him, and I said, you know what, I remember seeing an ad for a new album you came out with about 8 months ago or whatever it was, and I was hoping that you would be, regain your popularity, but unfortunately, I felt bad for you, and the album didn't do much for you. It doesn't. He says, I know how you feel. He says, I'm the one that went through it, and he agreed that it was hard for him to have that album come out, and it was kind of bombed and didn't do well. But his career, I would say, his peak was 83 to 88, and then it was a 5-year run, and by the late 80s, he was pretty much not having hits anymore, at least in the United States, maybe in Canada a little bit. But he came back for a tour in around 2013, a solo, like one of those farewell shows in Montreal, and it was a sellout, I think, and I didn't go to it, but listen, I mean, the guy was great. He doesn't have to worry about money. I think he does some work with Celine Dion, and he manages bands, so maybe he's doing very well, and he had a few hits anyway, so he married a French-Canadian singer. Can't remember her name. It slips my mind. And they have a few, I think 3 daughters, and live in the Bahamas somewhere, so I'm sure he's doing very well. Here is a show that, another boring show, but I love the band. I mean, I go on YouTube even last week, and I listened to about 3 or 4 of their songs. They were really good. The Fix, they were an kind of rock alternative. I don't think you call them alternative. They weren't that punky, but I liked their songs. Saved by Zero, Red Skies. But the show was kind of boring. It was like they were sitting around, and I think 75 people showed up. If I'm guessing, it was at the Club Soda. I think that was 2003. Yeah. And I don't know, it was a cold winter night. Maybe people didn't want to bother. It didn't get a lot of promotion. And it was just a boring show. Maybe I wasn't in the mood. I don't know what the reason was, but I didn't think it was a great show. But I still love their music. And then I see a little blue ticket stub where it says I paid $9 for a concert. But you know what? It doesn't say who the act was. So I have no clue. I have nothing to say about it since I don't know who the act was. Here's a show that... we'll wind down with 2 or 3 more to end the broadcast at AG's Music World. Jethro Tull. Funny enough, I went with a couple other friends. We were going to pay scalpers tickets, about 100 and something bucks to get really, really good seats. I was going to go and pay with my other 2 friends, but I was at a phone booth, and I see 1 ticket sitting there for the show. And they weren't great seats, but they were absolutely free. And it was in the balcony. So I figured, I got a $60 ticket for free. I don't think I want to go and spend 130 and sit in the front row and I get for nothing. So I did go sit by myself. Those two guys sat by themselves because they paid the scalpers tickets. So it was a rare free show for me, but I liked about half of the concert, and they did something which I understand why they did it, because it's their right, and they're probably so sick of playing Aqualung that they changed the way it's done. They didn't do it traditionally like on the record. Maybe they're just they've played it so many times the traditional way. But I was mad because they disappointed me by not playing the version that I liked. So I left there kind of not feeling too thrilled about the concert, but it was all right. I got through it. The other songs they did perform, and there was a lot of songs I didn't know too. So, second to last concert review is Saga. They were really big. They had a big following in Germany, Canadian, I think, in BC, and I thought they were great. The singer was really good, and they had about 5 or 6 hits, and very upbeat show. It was a club soda, $28. Wow, February of 2005. That was not that long ago when you think about it. And they did something that I've never seen before. There was a guy in the seats, and they put the spotlight on him, and they said, "Yes, here tonight I see is Joe," whatever his name was, I don't remember. And he was the original singer of Saga, and he left like 25, 30 years ago, or I think he was in the group playing some instrument, maybe not the singer. And they showed him being there, and he was like just sitting there with his friends, and it was weird to see them introduce a guy that was barely in the band, or he was in the band but wasn't no longer in the band. But I liked them. They had some good songs. Last show to discuss for the week, Eddie G's Music World, is Kool and the Gang. It was one of my early concerts. I worked for Showm at the time as volunteer, and they gave a couple of free seats to me and a friend that also worked there. And they were really ready to break out, Kool and the Gang, but they hadn't quite become the big band they did in the mid 80s. This is the early 1980, I think. And they said, "We're going to play a new song that we just came out with now," which wasn't a hit yet. And I knew it would be a hit because it was very well received, and I liked it. It was called Ladies' Night. So they played it for the first time, probably one of the early times they played it. And it was great, and they had a few other songs from the late 70s that I knew too. But then later on, after that show, they had about 10 other hits. So they broke out into the major mainstream in a big, big way, Kool and the Gang, following that concert that I saw. And I'm glad I saw it. It was a fun night. It was at Théâtre Saint-Denis, and it says 0 on the ticket price because it was free. Because I did volunteer work for Showm, and they weren't paying me, so they would give me free concert tickets, and they gave me free 45s and tapes or whatever to compensate me. I did research for Showm to find out what kind of music was popular. I'd go around with all kinds of papers and ask questions, and I loved it, and was hoping that it would stay in the station, but they kind of didn't hire me in the first place, so they certainly didn't want to pay me to stay there, and they didn't even want to let me work for free. It was a temporary spot that I filled for until the temporary spot was ended, and it would have been fun, but didn't turn into a stretch that I wanted it to, of course. Anyway, that about does it for another episode of Eddie G's Music World for April 24th, 2018. If you like it, or if you don't like it, say so. There's a comment section that shows up. You can say that. You can make a comment, and if you can subscribe, that would be great too. It would be appreciated, and I'll keep doing these shows. I like doing them, and if one day they catch on and people really enjoy it, then I'll be really thrilled that I got to that point where I had a lot of people that enjoy it. Until then, I'll keep doing it. Eddie G's Music World for another week. Thank you very much. Hope you like it, and take care. I'll do another one next week. Bye-bye.